What is going on, YouTube? Just helping you out here. In this video, I'm going to show how to build the passive dumping plate and arm that we used in this year's robot to complete most of the missions. I'll start with the dumping plate since this is new for this season, and then we'll move on to the geared arm, which we've shown a video on for a previous season. Please excuse any background noise or variation in lighting while I'm building. So with that said, I hope you enjoy the video. So this is the robot that we've been using this season. You've probably seen the videos. And it uses what we call a passive dumping plate. Allows you to just kind of bump into a mission model and it will dump out. And it also uses this geared arm that allows the dumping plate to remain at a constant level or constant angle through the excursion, so that you can have things dump into it or place things into it, and as you go up onto a mission model it'll stay level, and when you collide with a mission model it'll dump them over. Right? So it's pretty straightforward. I'll show you how to make this first and then we'll get on to the geared arm. I'm going to just set this off to the side. We're going to keep this close by so we can kind of reference it a little bit. Okay, so the first thing you're going to need is two of these plates, small one and a large one. These have come in some of the previous mission models from other years. Right? They actually come in handy. We're going to take a couple black pins. It's two black pins. Okay, and we're going to put these together. We're going to put them in the end hole of this one and connect these two together. Okay, and it will look like that. Again, pretty straightforward. And then kind of to just bridge that over, we're going to take a 15 beam and we're going to connect that by putting a couple black pins in the corner, and then we're going to center this on there. Alright, and that's just kind of our base. We're going to put everything on. I'm going to set that off to the side, and what I'm going to show you how to do now is we're going to build this section. Okay, so this is just a little side panel that has a stop built into it so that when the plate dumps, it won't completely dump over. Right, you're going to need that so that when it's dumping the material out or the whatever you're putting in there, we don't have the plate just kind of roll around and then it's going to get stuck. So, okay, so for the side section, we're going to need one of the larger L's. We're going to need a 5-position beam, and we're going to need a 7-position beam. So we'll take one of these. Okay, and then we're going to need a couple of these blue pins. Alright, and we're going to need a 2-position beam that has the hole in the one side that's for an axle, so there'll be a regular round hole in the one side, axle hole in the other side. We're going to need one of the small red axles. Okay, one of these small red axles, and we're going to need a black pin. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to put this together. We're going to have to keep in mind that there's one of these on each side and they are symmetrical, so there's going to be reversed on the one side of the other side. So what we're going to build right now is the one that goes on this side. So we're going to take a blue pin and put it in the end hole, the long blue pin. We're going to take the next long blue pin and put it in the second hole from the end. Okay. Then we're going to take the 5 beam and we're going to put that, excuse me, that's a 7 beam. We're going to put it on there like that. Okay, so it lines up with the end hole of the beam. Like that. Okay. Now for the bottom piece, we're going to add the stop. Okay, so we're going to put a black pin in the round hole, and we're going to put the axle in the other hole and just kind of make it come up flush to the end. We're going to take the black pin that we just put in here and we're going to put it in the end hole of the 5 beam. Okay, and then we're going to take that whole assembly and we're going to place the blue pin in the end hole of that beam, and that should look just like that. Okay, and it should move a little bit. I'm going to set that down and we're going to build another one of these. I have a couple of the pieces kind of sitting here ready. Okay, one of those, one of these. Oops. Okay, and I think I have this all ready together. Okay, so just going to kind of build this one the same as we did the other one. Okay, but remember, this is going to be symmetrical now, so we're going to have everything kind of pointing the opposite direction. Right, so we're going to put this up from the bottom on here, and we're going to put this on the top here. Put that on straight. Okay, so you should have parts that look like that. I'm just going to snap on the outside. Okay, I'm going to set them off to the side real quick. Take a quick look at the robot. Okay, so you'll notice on here we have these pieces that mount on that we just built, and then we have the, in this case, the yellow angled beam that winds up being what we pivot on. So let's go ahead and put that on. So we're going to need the smaller angled beam. There's two different versions of that angled beam. You can build with this one. It's a little different height. We chose to use the one with the smaller end on it. And you're going to need a black pin. And you're going to need one of the blue pins with the axle part on the one side and the pin on the other side. Okay, we have one we did here. So again, because it's symmetrical, I'm going to build this opposite of this one. Alright, so put that in the end. We're going to put the black pin 4 holes over. Okay, so we should have these. They should look just like that. I'm going to take the whole thing and put it together. So I'm going to take the white plate that we put aside before. I'm going to line up this hole, which is at the corner, and I'm going to line that up with the end hole here. So that will go in like that. Okay, so that should line up like this when you're done. Okay, and we'll do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to line this hole up with that. And that should look just like that. And what we're going to do is we're going to put the two pieces on that we just made. And in order to do that, we're going to use a couple of the longer 3-position black pins. And a couple of the standard black pins. Okay, so we're going to take the longer pin and we're going to put it through here and here. Okay, 3 in from the end. I'm going to take regular black pin and put it 2 in from the end on either side. And that should look like that. Then we're going to take the L from the part that we just made, and we're going to put the longer pin in the center of the L. And it should snap on just like that. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. Center, the larger pin. We're going to snap that down. And that should look just like that. Right? And then we're going to take the 13 we have here. Okay, that's a standard 13 beam. I'm going to place that on the back and centered. And that should be kind of what our plate looks like for the basic plate section. Have a couple more parts we have to put on here yet, but that's your basic plate. Okay, so we have a few more things we're going to put on this plate. Let's take a quick look at the robot. So these front pieces on here, this one is meant to keep the energy units or whatever you're going to have in here in so that they don't accidentally come out while you're driving around. This plate down here we found was good for grabbing things. If you want to go on top of something and grab it, we found that there were also other situations where we needed it to be a little deeper, so we added an additional one down here. So let's go ahead and add these. Right. So these are 9-pin. We're going to use a 9 here and a 9 on the bottom. And in order to put them on, we're going to use the longer black pins. So again, these are the 3-position black pins. Okay, and I'm going to take them put one in from the bottom there, one from the bottom. It actually doesn't matter whether you put it in from the bottom or the top. And we're going to stick the 9 position on the top and a 9 position on the bottom. Okay, should look like that. And that's the base that you would want to start with. This will keep parts in. This will let you grab some things. If you would like the additional part on the bottom, this is a 9. We're going to put a 7 on the bottom. We're going to put the 7 on with just a couple regular black pins. Okay, the standard black pins. And we're going to put them one hole in. And we're going to stick that on the bottom. So that will look like that. And that'll help you grab things a little bit lower. Alright. And then the other basic part that we put in there for now involves these 2 3-position Marquez blue beams and a 3-position black pin. Okay, and I'm just going to put these 2 on here like that, and they're just stacked up, and we're going to snap that back here in the corner, and it just sits there like that. Purpose for this is when energy units come in here, you kind of want them to not all group up in a corner. So the idea was they would come in here, hit this, and move over. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but show you how to put it in there just in case you need it. And then the last thing we have on here as part of our standard plate is this this T. And you'll notice this is a half height T. Okay, so they make some of these parts in the half height. And this is actually pretty light and pretty small. So in order to mount this, we didn't want a pin that went all the way through. So what you would need for that is you're going to need one of these smaller pins, blue pin, and it's hard to tell, but if you notice, it's got the regular pin on the bottom, and it's got this almost like quarter height or third height pin on the top there. See if you can see that. And I'm going to take that, I'm going to push it up into there. That mount's actually pretty tight in there. And then we're going to take that, we're going to pop it in the second beam hole over, and that just kind of pivots. The whole idea there is if you need it, you can put it out and things can kind of hit that first before they go in here. If you don't need it, you can turn it in so you don't have to keep putting things in and out, in and out. It's always there if you need it. Alright, so that's basically the dumping plate. Now what we have to do is build the part of this that actually holds it and allows it to dump. Okay, so I'm going to set this off to the side. Now let's take a look at this robot. Okay, so you'll notice that here's the plate that we just made, alright, and it pivots on this little arm section here. Alright, so let's take a look at that from the bottom. Alright, so that's what that looks like from the bottom. Alright, so let's go ahead and build that. We'll build these beams here, and then we'll attach them to the plate. Okay, so in order to do that, we're going to need a couple of these 9s. Again, we've got one of these on each side, so we're going to build them the opposite of each other. And then we're going to need, we already have the base built to attach it to, so we're going to now need to put it on with a couple of these smaller L's. Okay, and that's going to hold the parts on. And then we're also going to need, again, a couple of these 2-position beams that have a round hole and have an axle hole. These are kind of a little difficult to see, but they do have one axle hole and one round hole. So we need a couple of those. Okay. Now, in order to attach some of this together, we're going to need a couple of the blue pins that are axle on one side and the standard pin on the other side. So here's a couple of those. And we're going to need a couple of the regular black pins. Okay. Alright, so let's look at one side of this. We'll build the one side and then we'll build the other. Okay, so I'm going to take the L, and you'll notice the one end hole in the L has the axle hole in it. So we're going to take the axle side of the pin and put it in there. Alright, let's just go ahead and do that on both sides while we have them here. Alright, so they're going to look like that. Alright, and then in the hole next to that, we're going to add a black pin. Same thing over here. Okay? Right. Now to hold this beam on, we're going to align the end hole with the black pin that we just put in here and snap that in place. And we'll do the same thing on this side. Alright, so one of these is going to go actually on the outside like that. This one's going to go on the outside like that. Okay, now, purpose of these is to allow an axle to lock into this L. Alright, and we needed that because we're going to hold this whole assembly up with an axle, but we don't have anything to support the axle in the L. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a black pin, and we'll put a black pin in each one of these. Alright, and then we're going to put these on, and I'm putting them on in this direction because my axle is going to be using the bottom hole here. Okay, if you flip them the other way, your axle could use the other side. So I'm going to put this on like that. Alright, and that gives me the two side arms that I'm going to use to hold the plate. Now, let's bring the plate over. This is going to kind of sit in here like this. Okay, and in order for the plate to be able to pivot, we're going to need two of these gray pins. There's also beige ones that you can use. The purpose of these are what's called a non-friction pin. So unlike the black pin, if we were to take this pin and we were to put it in here, right, this allows this to just spin around, right, and you need that in order for the plate to be able to dump. They come in gray, they come in beige. What you don't want is the blue or the black pin because that would just stick. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to put it in the third hole back on each side. Alright, and then we're going to take the part that we just made and we're going to line the end hole with the bend hole, or the end here, like this. Okay, so that should pivot like that, and that should line up with the bottom of the plate, just like that. Alright, and I'm going to put one of them on either side. And do the same thing over here. Line this up with the end hole here. Snap that on. So that should be what our plate looks like. Okay, and it should dump pretty easily. Okay, should just kind of ride on those. Now, important thing about where you put this pin. If you put this pin a little further back, alright, this will be a lot easier to dump over, and you have to be careful because it may be too easy. If some of the material you're carrying is forward of that, it might just dump all by itself. If you move the pin up towards the front a little bit more, it'll make it a little bit more difficult, so that you'd have to hit the mission model a little harder. Sometimes you want that, sometimes you don't. The testing that we did, we found the third hole back seems to work out pretty good. Doesn't tend to dump when we don't want it to, and we've had pretty good luck with it dumping when we've pushed it into a mission model. So that's basically what the arm looks like, or excuse me, what the plate looks like. So what we're going to do is I'm going to set this aside, and we're going to discuss the arm that holds this, that's the geared arm. Again, we've done that in a previous video, but we'll do it again with this one so you can see what we did on this robot. Okay, so let's take a look at the arm itself, the geared arm. So here's the geared arm. Okay, as you can see, allows the dumping plate to kind of stay level through its excursion. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at how to build that. Okay, so we're going to start with a couple 15 position beams. Okay, they're actually the supports on the outside. And we're going to kind of connect them together with these pinned L's, okay, large L's with the pins in them. And then we're going to support those with a 9-position beam on the outside, a 7-position beam on the inside, and another 7-position beam on the outside as kind of a locking bar. We'll explain that in a little bit. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at this. You'll notice that we have this beam across the center here for support, and it happens to line up the center with the center gear. So basically what we have here is we have the 15 beam, and we're going to take this so that this hole in the side lines up with the center hole in here. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And there's the 8th holes in the center. Alright? So we're just going to put this next to it so we can easily line that up. Alright? So we should basically have two beams that look like that. The L's in them, and the hole in here should be in the center hole up. Okay, so 7 on each side and that center hole in the middle. Alright? Then we're going to take the 7 beam, attach it at the bottom on here, and attach it on here. So that should look like that. And that's your basic cross beam, but notice it is kind of a little wobbly here. Okay, so in order to support that a little bit better, what we're going to do is we're going to take 4 standard black pins. Alright, we're going to actually use all 4 of the holes across the front here in the L's. Give it some good support. I'm going to take the 9, I'm going to snap the 9 on there centered. Right? That actually gives it a fair amount of support. Now it doesn't wobble around quite as much. Okay, and then we're going to add this additional one onto the front as a stop. We'll explain what that is once we get everything together. It actually stops the dumping plate from dumping over when it's in its down position. We'll go over that. And that's what that looks like. Okay, so that's basically the simple part of the arm. That's like a little H. So let's go ahead and look at what we have to do to put the gears on. In order to use the gears, using a middle-sized gear here, they're not really small. I think these are a 24-tooth gear. Right? And we're going to use, to start putting them on, we're going to use the beige pins that have the beam on the one side and have the standard pin on the other side. Okay, so these are very much like the blue ones that we've been using, except as we mentioned earlier, these are frictionless. So again, if I were to snap one of these in here, this will just spin, right? And we need that for the gears. You have to have the frictionless pins for the gears. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in 3 of the gears. These will be the 3 middle gears. Alright, I'm going to take that and put it in this center hole. Again, remember we put this L in here so that the hole was centered. I'm going to put that in there like that. And then we're going to move 4 positions over and snap another one in. And then do the same thing on this side. Okay, so that should look just like that. Alright, and that's going to sit in the robot like this. We're going to have our drive gear up here. And we're going to have the final driven gear down here with an axle that goes across. Okay, so let's take a look at what that looks like in the robot. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over. It's a little easier to see from the bottom. So if you see on the robot on the bottom, okay, we have an axle going through. We have a couple of these spacers in here. Alright, so we have a spacer on this side, a spacer on that side. That kind of makes it equal. We have these spacers on the inside that keep the axles in. And then we have a coupler in the middle that will couple the axle from either side. And then those axles go through those black beams that we put in earlier that have the axle hole on the one side and the regular pin hole on the other side. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at how we would attach that. Alright, so I'm going to bring my plate over, right, and bring this off to the side. And what we're going to need is we're going to need some 9-position axles. The way you know that is if you take the axle and you lay it up against a 9-position beam, it should go from end hole to end hole, just like this one does. Okay, so these are 9 position. So this is going to kind of sit in here like this. We're going to have a gear in here. Remember, we talked on this one about a gear with a spacer in it on the one side. So we're going to take this axle and we're going to push it through from the one side. That should start going through. Okay. And then remember, we have one of the little yellow spacers in there. So we're going to take one of these little yellow spacers. We're going to put a small yellow spacer in there. And then we're going to put the gear in. Alright, and we're going to slide that through just a little bit so that pin starts coming through there, like that. Okay. And then we're going to take this and put it 4 holes down from the other one. And we're going to start pushing it through. Alright. And you don't need to go quite all the way that far. You can leave a little bit sticking out here. Alright. I'm going to take one of the gray spacers. It's the double wide spacer there. Put that in the inside. So we have the smaller yellow spacer in here, and we have the gray spacer here. Then the last thing I'm going to put on there is, this is a coupler, right, versus a spacer. So the coupler will have an axle hole in one side, an axle hole in the other side, and when you put 2 axles on either side, it kind of couples them together so they work together. Okay, so we're going to put that on here, just like that. Okay, so now we have something that kind of drives that. Okay, and now what we have to do is connect the same thing on the other side. Now on the other side, we certainly don't have the gear, so we're just going to use the yellow spacer in between. We're going to take the axle, put it through like we did on the other side. We're going to take the yellow spacer, put the yellow spacer on there, just like that. Okay. We're going to take that and put it through second hole up, because that's what lines up with the gear on the other side. Okay, we're going to push that through, and we're going to push it all the way through till it goes into the black coupler. Okay, and that should look just like that. Okay, now one of the things we did forget, or I forgot, is we should have another gray spacer on here that just makes sure that things don't slide out any more than they have to. So I'm going to pop that back out real quick. I'm going to put my gray spacer in there, and then I'm going to push that back in again. Okay, so now everybody's together. They're going to have the axle stick out a little bit on either side. It doesn't matter which side it sticks out on. As long as everything is connected with sufficient material that you know that you're grabbing. Alright. The one thing you do want to make sure you have is a little bit of space in here and a little bit of space in here, because this is where your pivot is coming from. And if you make them too tight, and this gap is too tight in here, then your plate is going to stick. Okay, so you want to make sure that you have a little bit of space there. And there's your dump. Okay. Now, if I were to hold this gear here and spin it, you can see how this works. Okay. And then when you're in position, all something has to do is hit that, and it dumps over. Okay. Now, the last gear typically goes on with some kind of axle at the top. All right. What axle you use is really up to how you make your robot. So that axle is going to go in, again, the second hole from the top. And this axle is actually going to be attached to something fixed on your robot, and it must be at the same level as the center of the motor on the other side, or whatever you're driving it with. You can drive it with a gear on the other side, but your pivot has to be at the same level. So let's look at that on the robot. Okay, if you look at this robot, okay, center of this comes across and goes to the center of this motor, so that when you pivot, you've got the same pivot point. Okay, so what you do with this gear in your robot is going to be different. Way we support on our robot is going to be different than yours. Again, this is a very personalized thing. You're going to have to see how this works into your robot. The important part is the motor and this gear center line have to be the same. Okay, so wherever you decide to put this, this has to be mounted somehow, fixed, all right, so that your motor is turning this axle, all right, and when your motor turns the axle and this stays still, everything will remain level. Okay, so on our robot, you'll see again we have this going into a axle hole on an L, which kind of keeps that stable. All right, so this gear doesn't move. All right, you'll notice that gear never moves. All right, this moves, drives through the axle, and drives the gears. So again, how you mount it on your robot is really up to you. This is basically how you build it. If you have any questions or comments on what you saw here, please let us know. But that's about it for this build video. So feel free to check out all our other LEGO videos in the playlist in the top left corner. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a like, leave a comment if you have any questions or an idea for a future video. And lastly, don't forget to subscribe and tell your friends about my channel so I can grow and help more of you guys out. I'm just helping you out. See you in the next video.